Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and listening to K4CO Radio this morning. We have very special guests with us today, an exclusive interview with your REMAX professionals. Michelle Romano and Allie Peters are back with us today. Good morning, ladies. Thank you for being with us today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is super exciting to me. I think so much is going on with our market, and I had so much feedback the last time that you guys were here about what is going on with all of the housing, what's going on with the market, the interest rates, and of course we're going to get into some really big crazy news that is kind of shaking up the world in a little bit later, because you guys are the people that are going to have all of the answers, because sometimes the internet isn't always so accurate is what I know is what I'm finding out.
If it's online, it's true.
It's true. Well, it's so interesting. So we won't get into the details yet, but with this lawsuit coming on, it has so many different spins. I'm like, well, is that accurate? It all depends on how you're looking at it.
There's a lot of information floating around. That's for sure.
That is for sure. I totally agree. So we will get into that later. But for those of you tuning in, again, we have Michelle and Allie. They are our REMAX professionals. They are natives to Colorado, which is pretty amazing. So they know Colorado extremely, extremely well. They know all of the areas. You guys go kind of all over the state. You guys go really far south and up to Westminster area. What areas are you guys covering?
Yeah, I'd say we go southwise, kind of cut it off at like Monument. A lot of times we sometimes go into the Springs, depending on just location-wise. And then, north up to Westminster, Thornton, east out to Elizabeth, west out to Golden. It's just a huge circle around the Denver metro area.
Nice. You guys, get to see a lot of Colorado. We talked about that last time and how beautiful our state is. Mm-hmm. And you guys get a very good feel of where everything is, where our parks are and lakes that I never knew existed. I'm sure you guys get to see all of that.
Yes, it's a lot of driving.
Absolutely. Yeah, I bet a good gift card for you would be to replenish your gas tank.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wouldn't complain.
That is so true. Well, thank you, girls, again, for being here with us. It means a lot to us. Wanted to jump in because a lot has changed from COVID. From a couple years ago. I think we're still seeing a little bit of the aftermath of that with the market. What have you all seen coming into the springtime and starting in 2024? What have you all seen as far as market rates, what's going on today, and where do you kind of predict where it's going to be going?
Yeah, no, great question. So I would say right now the market is starting to level itself out, starting to balance out a little bit more. Leaning a little bit more towards sellers still, but we are up quite a bit in inventory. So, for example, in the COVID years, we were sitting at about 1,000 active homes per month, which was very low. So now we're sitting more closer to like 9,000 homes. I just looked today and we're at 9,000 active listings. So a lot more options out there, which is great. The good listings, the ones that are priced well, in a good condition and in a good location, those are still going quickly. So they might have multiple offer situations, but doesn't mean that, a house that has been sitting on the market for a few weeks isn't a bad home. Maybe it's just been overlooked. So I would say the market is definitely starting to balance itself out, which has been really nice for both sides, I would say, buyers and sellers who are trying to sell and get into their first home or just, into a home in general.
For sure. That's a big spike to go from, you said 2,000 homes to now 9,000 active. And is that around the Denver metro area or is that kind of covering all of Colorado?
Yeah. So that's the kind of the 7 counties that are in the Denver area.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is kind of the sweet spot, if you will, for people to get into the bidding wars? And what are some of the outliers? And I have a follow-up question to that. I just purchased a home, so I have been immersed in this craziness for a little bit. How do you make a house, if you're selling, how do you make it more attractive to someone where it would stand out?
Well, which question do you want us to answer first?
You can choose.
You tossed a few over.
Sorry. It's like an essay of one and then A and B. Yeah, whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, one of the cool parts about us and our team, we do have a stager on our team. So when it comes to selling a home, that's really helpful. We have her go in, and as long as the home doesn't need a ton of updates, if it needs updates, you go through that with the homeowner if it's worth updating it, or if you're just going to kind of take that off the top of the purchase price. But other than that, we have our stager go in, kind of help declutter the home, what should stay, what should go. She takes some things that they already have and maybe rearranges it into just making it look more like a professionally staged home rather than lived in. Not that people, you just live in a house and it's not perfect all the time. And then she also has her own stuff as well that she brings in to just make it just look a little bit better. And then we do that, get it professionally cleaned. Like I said, any little updates, whether it's just paint, stuff like that. We usually do a pre-inspection as well to make sure that everything's in proper working condition, if we need to fix anything huge or if there's anything that needs to be addressed to the buyers beforehand. So we do all of that just to make sure it's in the best possible condition before hitting the market.
On your pre-inspection, I mean, how deep do you go into, I guess, big things, water heaters, stuff like that, electrical, to small things, just like, this room could use a little paint? I mean, how kind of thorough or deep do you guys go into that?
Yeah, so we actually use an inspection company for our pre-inspections.
Okay.
So a company we've been using for 20 plus years, very reliable. We love them and we hate them because they find every single little thing that's, could be an issue. So they're going to be looking at the water heater, the furnace, sewer line, the big ticket items that might come up. It might be worth replacing before coming on the market, or we might just wait it out and take care of, GFCIs and, things like that, that come up on inspection. So yeah, it's pretty thorough, before we come on the market.
So even the smallest things that could just help or needed. Gotcha.
Yep.
That's a really good point. Coming from both the seller or the buyer, of course, I'm always weighing this in my head, right? All the pros and cons. So the big ticket items, right? That's what everyone is looking at. But for a roof, for example, if you are trying to sell your home and you need a full replacement, I mean, that could be $100,000 right there. So if you're looking at the seller's point of view, and I'm sure there are a million different situations with this, is it better for the seller to go in and say, yes, we're going to replace our roof or our HVAC system, or, do all of these big ticket items and maybe sell the house for a higher price? Or is it better to say, we're not going to fix it and put it on whoever's buying it? Is there one way? I know you both, I could tell by your face. I understand that it goes probably both ways there.
Yeah, that's just like each specific case scenario. You kind of just address it as you go. You can, if they're willing to do it and want to get everything done to price it higher, you can do that. Or we just are aware of the problem, and when the buyer comes in, we're like, we've already done this. We know it's going to come up for you, so we've already addressed it. Unfortunately, the sellers aren't going to do it, but we're willing to work with you, negotiate. I mean, it's case by case on how it goes, but it's just always good for us to be aware of it beforehand, so it's not something that comes out of left field that now we're scrambling to figure out, can we get this deal done because this is going on, but we already know going in. Okay.
What do you think is one of the major reasons coming from 2,000 active to now 9,000? And that's been over like a 2 or 3 year period. Am I accurate in that? What is kind of the biggest driving reason, do you think, for that?
I don't think that there's like a specific reason per se. I think COVID, everybody, was staying in their homes, right? Because they didn't know what was going to happen. And they're like, I don't want to sell and then buy. And then, something else comes in and now you have a new mortgage. So I would say it's more, everyone has to move, whether they like it or not. So whether they're, moving for a job, I would say here in Denver specifically, the population has become, way more just increased over the past few years, and that's driving a lot of people to move that have lived here for 20 years and was used to, just rush hour traffic, and now you have traffic all day, every day. So I would say, job changes is a big one. People moving from their homes that they lived in for 20 years into maybe a retirement community, downsizing, upsizing, that sort of thing, is kind of the main drivers as to why people sell. Unless there's anything else you'd want to add.
Well, and I feel like they were less actives on the market during COVID because we had a lot more buyers. Because more people were getting into the market because interest rates were so low. So people saw that and it was like, if I'm qualified right now, let's just go for it because interest rates are at 2.5 or 3. So houses were going much quicker. So when we took inventory of how many were on the market, they weren't sitting for as long as they are now. Not that they're like a lot long now, but before, I mean, a house would go in 4 hours, whereas now it might be a couple days to a couple weeks. So I think everything was just moving a lot quicker. So it wasn't as many active sitting on the market.
That makes sense. So you're seeing kind of a longer period. Again, is this like for your, what is the sweet spot? What is kind of the mean or average price around the metro area? Again, I know it varies, but what do you think is kind of the average Colorado price?
So I would say right now for a attached home, so that would be either a condo or a townhome, we're about $450, $475. For a single family home, we're closer to like $650.
Okay. That's actually higher than, that is higher than what I was thinking. So if you were selling, let's say in the sweet spot, that average spot, so around 650, do you usually see that it's going pretty quick? Is this in a couple days or is it a week, 2 weeks? What is the kind of usual time frame?
Yeah, I'd say in the sweet spot areas, they are going faster than other ways. I mean, you get up more in the high 700s plus, you're more in like the luxury market. So those are sitting for a bit longer than the ones between 400 to 650. Again, it just also depends on location and condition of the home. But yes, I would say they're going a little bit faster in that lower range than if you go higher.
Okay. Very cool. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, there's a lot of cool stuff. Like I know that rates are changing. And people can actually buy down rates, which I find I didn't know that. I'm a second time home buyer and I didn't know that information that you could still do that with construction stuff. So we're going to take a quick break and we will be back. Again, we are with Michelle and Allie, your REMAX professionals.
And we are back on K4CO Radio. Sitting down with us right now is Allie Peters and Michelle Romano, who are with REMAX professionals. And thank you again very much for coming in. So they're going to be stopping by and kind of talking kind of monthly, giving us some updates. And one thing that I know Sarah wants to get into, and everybody's kind of been talking, and everything on the internet is of course true, so it's a little bit of confusion, is something very specific to Colorado, right? It's really just for the Colorado settlement here. And so tell us a little bit. Last time you really couldn't, but
I don't know if that's true. We're going to get into that.
Ooh, see? Exactly. I don't know.
The internet is not always right.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's like very common news that everyone's like, wow, there's been this big lawsuit with NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors, kind of changing things up a little bit. Essentially what happened was it started in Missouri. And it was a class action lawsuit. So many states, not Colorado not being one of them, didn't have something called a buyer agency agreement. So that's basically an agreement that you have between you and your realtor if you're buying a home, saying, I'm working for you, we're working together, and at the end of this, like, I will eventually be paid.
So Colorado has this agreement?
Yes, they've had it for decades.
Okay. All right.
But some other states had not, like Missouri, for instance.
Okay.
So now... there has to be an agreement. So there has to be, nationally, there has to be an agreement between you and your realtor that you're using to buy a home. And
seems logical.
Right, right. Yeah. So it's something that we've had here in Colorado, so it doesn't really affect us that much. The only thing that's different is that in the MLS, there used to be what's called a co-op. So they used to market, just specifically to agents what the commission would be paid for, to the buy side's agent. So that would just be listed. So you would know going into a home, the seller's paying 2.5% to the buyer's agent.
Okay.
It all started because it wasn't, commissions have always been negotiable, period. But I guess it wasn't specifically spoken about to sellers that they had an option, to not pay, per se, both sides of the commission, which there's always been that option, but maybe it just wasn't communicated properly by the listing agent when they're getting the listing. So, it makes sense that it needs to be more communicated, and I think that's great. I feel like we've always, over communicated because we'd rather, be safe than sorry. But if you're not offering, if the seller decides not to offer a co-op to the buyer's agent, then the likelihood of having more buyers come look at your home is going to probably be more slim, because, the buyer's already trying to come up with, 5 to 20% down. They can't really afford to pay their agent, right? So now it's still in the works. It hasn't gone into full effect. It'll go into effect in August. And so us as agents and, companies are trying to figure it out. REMAX Professionals, our company, has settled with NAR. We're all good to go as far as the lawsuit goes. But come August, it'll be interesting to see how that co-op is communicated. Can't be in the MLS, and it can't be in showing instructions. So is it going to be, a sign on the tree when you walk into the home?
I agree. This is my biggest pet peeve, personally. Yeah. I don't understand it.
Is it going to be, balloons outside the house? Exactly. We're offering 2.5%. Like, who knows? But at the end of the day, as a buyer's agent, you should have an agreement. You should have some type of written agreement between you and your buyer, because you could be showing a buyer for 3 years, right, and never get paid. So, having that value and expressing that to your buyers as to what we do and how we would add that value to you is huge. I've been talking about this, buying a home is or moving in general is one of the top 3 most stressful life events that you'll go through, behind losing a loved one and divorce. So if you were getting a divorce, would you want to represent yourself? Or are you going to get an attorney? Right. So that's kind of like us. If you're making the biggest, financial decision that you might make in your life, it's probably in your best interest to have an agent, to help represent you, to help negotiate on your behalf, and to help, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes other than just opening the door.
So in August, what's starting is just like the full disclosure. What's specific about August then? I kind of lost that.
Yeah. So in August, the co-op won't be listed in the MLS. So if I'm going out with a buyer and we're going to go look at 5 homes, I won't know whether or not the buyer or the seller is going to be offering a co-op or not.
Right.
So what we're going to start doing is we're just going to be putting it in the offer. At the very bottom, there's something called additional provisions. That's probably what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You have your offer, and then seller to pay buyer's commission at, 2.5 or whatever % that is in the buyer agency agreement.
Perfect.
For me, it truly seems like this is unnecessary and more work for you all as the agents, especially since Colorado was doing kind of and I am not in the market, but I would do I call it exclusivity with my agent. Exactly. I'm like, you have now spent, for me, it was 10 months, and I looked at roughly 40 or 50 homes with this one person. And it's like, you have spent time and gas and all of that. And since it's so interesting to me that the communication now is going to be a little more challenging, so it makes it harder. And I feel like we as Colorado are being unnecessarily penalized because we've been doing this for so long. Mm-hmm. So I get that NAR is national and it oversees the entire United States, but why wouldn't they have gone to places or states that weren't implementing that? I find it interesting. Or if that is even allowed. Can you go to like a state like Missouri and be like, hey, Colorado's been already doing this. You just have to change it.
Yeah, I wish it was that easy, but since it is national, it just affects everybody, and it does affect the states that didn't have buyer agencies previously. Right. Which I think you should always have a buyer agency. I don't know why you would let anyone in your car if there wasn't some type of agreement, that we're working together. So yeah, it's interesting. It does make things a little bit more complicated, but quite frankly, we've been doing this for a while now, and something that I pride myself in is I do sit down with my buyers before even going to look at a house, and I walk through the whole entire process and what to expect and what not to expect, have them answer all their questions then, and then go into the buyer agency, be like, if you think we would be a good fit, before we go look at anything, it's a requirement by my office that I have to have this signed. And then usually at that point, it's like, well, yeah, like we're good to go. Let's go. And it's not a big deal. And now NAR's making it a whole deal. And in Colorado, it's not a big deal. And,
Right.
It's just conversations maybe that other agents weren't having that they need to have now and show that they have value and that they earned, a commission at the end of the day.
For sure. And you had mentioned you're now writing this in the provisions. Now, is this a conversation that you actually are writing a contract on? Or can you then call the other agent saying you're representing a buyer, and you call the selling agent and say, hey, what's going on? So is that now a conversation between the two agents? Do you have to wait for the contract to be written? Or can this be a verbal discussion beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be like the biggest hump of getting through is just figuring out how we go about figuring it out. You can absolutely just call the other agent and be like, what's going on? But the difference is we don't know as a buyer's agent if the selling agent can tell us straight up what they're offering or not. So it's just going to be a lot more of in-depth conversations, a lot more communication. If we're going out to see 10 houses in a weekend, our follow-up is just going to be a little bit more tedious of calling and figuring out what's going on, or we just put it in the contract and then go negotiate from then. Because if our client loves a house and they want to buy that house, we're not going to stop that based on what the commission's going to be for us. We're just going to put in the contract what we have agreement with our buyers, and then if the sellers come back, it just becomes a negotiation process, which is very typical in real estate.
Yes.
It's nothing new.
Yep.
So it's just going to be a bit more communication and probably a bit more negotiation.
Okay. So really, if you all called the other agent, they don't have to necessarily disclose that to you. They can say, if you really want this property, write us a contract and then we will go into negotiations.
Yeah, I would say, that's kind of in the works. Like it's up to the seller whether or not they want, to disclose that. I mean, when you get your listing agreement signed, it should be in there.
Okay.
It's, right now it's typically 6%. 3.2 of that goes to the listing agent, and then 2.8 of that goes to the buyer's agent. That's how, at least we handle it at REMAX. Other people handle it a little bit differently. But on the flip side of things, if you're a seller and you're willing to offer, 2.5%, but then the buyer's agent has an agreement for 1%, it's more beneficial for your seller not to necessarily share what your co-op is, because if they have an agreement of 1%, then sure, great, awesome, let's go with that.
Right.
So it's still in the works. It hasn't been finalized. They said it was going to be July. They've already pushed it to August. So I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't go into until next year. But it is the talk of the town, and I think it's good that everybody gets information from people who are used to this and know what they're kind of talking about.
Yeah, if you have questions, call a realtor. Don't go on the internet.
Yeah, it's so fun. I know. I started doing more research. I'm like, stop, because it's all over the board with
rabbit hole.
Who's getting penalized, essentially.
Well, and I can imagine, I haven't done a whole lot of research of what's going on in other states too, but I mean, the changes we're making here are probably very different from what they're making in Missouri, because we've had better systems in place. So, I mean, if you're looking online too, it could be pulling information from anywhere. Whereas here, it's a big deal and it's the talk of the town, but not a whole lot is going to be changing for us.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a big game of Texas Hold'em to me. It's like, who's going to show what hand and win. And it's so interesting. And negotiating a little bit. And to me, it does sound like it's the heavier lifting is going to be on the agents, not necessarily the buyer or the seller. Mm-hmm. So it's, for me, I feel for you all being in the industry, it just seems like an extra unnecessary hurdle, especially since it's something that we as a state have already been doing. Mm-hmm. So, I hope that it gets worked out, and that, like you said, it's written in the provisions. And if you're dealing with upstanding and ethical agents, that you call and you're like, hey, here's what we have. Here's what you have. Can we start the negotiations? Here's our contract, to make it kind of streamlined. Because like you said, it's also a very stressful process for everyone going through it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's how I look at it. I try and make things easy in a difficult world.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it's really going to come down to the buyers too, right? Because it's like, I love both of these homes. One of them's not offering a co-op and one is. Mm-hmm. So I would much rather go that route so that you can get paid and I don't have to come up with more money on my end since I'm already scraping the bottom of the barrel. So it's going to be, interesting. But when working with your buyers, it's just good to have that open line of communication and just be honest, like, hey, I'm not going to work for free, as I'm sure you wouldn't want to either. And there's a lot of value associated with having an agent. So it's in the seller's best interest to offer a co-op. Same with buyers. Let's just, make it simple and easy as it's been for decades here in Colorado and not make a whole fuss about it. I feel like whenever I do explain it to people, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's
right.
For sure.
Obviously that makes sense versus, everything on the internet is like, oh my gosh. So it is what it is.
too.
The real estate world is ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they've blown it a tad out of proportion.
No.
No,
They don't
of
do
course
that.
Not. News
Never.
would never do that.
Never.
Yeah, the first thing I heard, I was like, this isn't right.
It's like realtors
it
aren't going to
just-
be a thing anymore. And I'm like, okay.
I've heard
Yeah,
that.
good luck.
I've heard that too. That there's a lockbox and they have
terrifying.
an app that you can now go in and just let yourself into a house.
Yeah.
That is
That
very
sounds safe.
no, it
Yeah.
sounds insane. I would never do that in a million. Seriously, you have a little app and you upload, I think, your driver's license. I don't
I
even
have
know
no
if this
idea.
is true. See?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, see, good.
But
So
that
I'm
doesn't
making
sound
it up.
very good.
It sounds very, very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm not just letting some random people go through my house.
Yeah. As an
without
agent, I
someone
would
there.
not recommend
I
that to a seller.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nor would I. Yeah, that's very crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to get into the rates with you all after we're going to take another quick break, and there's a lot more to be heard. So for those of you listening, thanks again for tuning into K4CO Radio. Again, we have Allie and Michelle, your REMAX professionals. We'll be back here after this tune.
We are back sitting right here with Allie Peters and Michelle Romano. You can reach them at 720-341-2959. You can also reach them at 303-328-7075. Also on k4coradio.com under businesses. You can find them here. Just kind of talking about the market again. They're going to be joining us once a month for a little while. Just kind of letting all of our listeners know exactly what is going on in the market. Do know that we are going to start talking about rates right now. It's not like they used to be where they're very nice and attractive. I'll say prime is still, over 8%, I think.
Is that correct?
High sixes right now.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We've come down a little bit
We
since
have
last
come
time I
down.
saw you guys, which is great.
Yeah, that's good. No, that is good news, definitely. So,
Well, no, that is great. I'm glad that it is lowering because I know that at the beginning of the year, even last year, it definitely was an issue. Of course, being on the buyer-seller side, I am doing my own research, if you will. But so I love talking with people that actually know the market and know what's accurate. So explain to our listeners, especially for those first-time home buyers, explain how you can buy down a rate. What is the process of that? How does that work? What are the benefits? All of that
yeah,
stuff.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so you can buy down the rate. The amount depends on how much you want to buy it down, but you can do what's pretty common is a 2-1 buy down, which means that your interest rate goes down for the first 2 years and then it goes up a little bit again after the 1 year, which would technically be the third, and then goes back to what it originally is today. And you can buy it down either yourself. You could take it off the top of what your down payment is. So say you want to put down 15%, you can take 10% of that or 5% of that and put it towards buying your rate down instead of putting all of it down up front, which then would save you in the long run because your mortgage payment each month is less instead of just putting it all down up front. So you can do it yourself, or what we are seeing a lot is a seller concession, which means when you're going to buy the house, we write it into the contract that seller is going to provide a concession of $10,000 to help buy down the buyer's rate. So then it's not coming out of your own pocket, and it's coming off the top of the purchase price. Pretty much the way it works with the sellers is you go in at a number and then it comes off during closing costs. So the sellers then give the buyer money towards buying down their rate, but it works out for everybody because the buyers are able to buy the home, the sellers are able to sell the home, and the buyers get a lower interest rate for a small amount of time, if that Made sense.
It did. Thank you.
I'm glad it made sense to you. I'm a little. No, I mean, it just kind of. So you're basically spending money. You're giving money to get a lower rate for a set amount of time.
Yes.
So when you do buy down the rate, is it not a fixed rate then, your mortgage? Like it does change a little bit with the buying down?
It could be either, quite frankly.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could just buy down the rate in general. So say we're at, 6.75 right now. You could buy it down to 6.5, 6 and 6 1/4. And that could stay, steady, for the next 30 years.
30 years, yeah, whatever it is.
Or like Allie was talking about, a 2-1 buy down. You could buy down the rate, say it's at, 6.5, let's make it easy. You could buy it down so that you're paying, 4.5 for the first year. Then you go up to 5.5 for the second year. And then your third year, you would end at the 6.5. And then hopefully, ideally by then, you're hoping that rates have already come down and then you can refinance. So there's kind of two ways to do it. They cost different. One's going to be obviously more expensive to do that, but there is an option, and your lender should be able to provide that information, and it is beneficial. And we do see that almost every settlement statement when we close now, is a lot of people are buying down the rates because it makes more sense for your monthly payment.
Nice. Okay. I was going to ask how prevalent that is. So it sounds like that's very frequent that you'll see people doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, most listing appointments I've gone on lately, I've brought up that could be an expectation to be set, that there might be a buyer coming in asking us to buy down the rate, just because, rates are high, housing prices are higher here, so it makes sense for a lot of buyers in order to get in for the first few years for their payment to be a little bit lower. So it's pretty common enough to be talked about pretty consistently with sellers.
Is there any... Sorry.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, is that also it might be attracted to somebody who maybe doesn't think they'll be in the house that long? Is that buying it down so that you're paying a lower percentage for the, couple years and then, selling it so it doesn't have to go up? Or is that... That's just what my brain went to.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. If you already are only going to be living here for a few years, then, why not? But rates are pretty universal all over, right? So it doesn't matter where you are, you could still do that. But yeah, that's a good point. It hasn't come up because, quite frankly, I feel like everyone that we've been working with sees themselves in their house for at least 5+ years to gain that equity, especially here in Colorado because it goes up so fast.
Right.
But that's also a good option to go ahead and just get it bought down if you're only going to be here for a little while.
For a certain amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. If you know that you're going to get relocated with either job or especially military, if you know you're going to move in 18 months or 2 years, are you capped at how many times you can do a buy down, or is it with every new purchase you can do that?
Yeah, every new purchase. Yeah, it's not capped. It's your money, right, that you're or potentially the sellers, right, that you're putting down. So, yeah, you can buy down the rates for the rest of your life every time you buy a house if you want.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting. I know we don't have a crystal ball.
You don't?
I wish I did, believe me. Is there any prediction in the next 6 months or year or 2 years with what rates will do in Colorado or on a national basis?
Well, they said at the beginning of the year that rates were going to be adjusted, 6 times?
Yeah, 4 to 6 times.
4 to 6 times. And a lot of people were expecting them to go down more than they have so far. So I think that's kind of the expectation. Not that they're going to go anywhere close to where they were a few years ago, but we are hoping at least that they keep going down at least slightly. Because, last time we were in here, they were at 8. Now they're high 6s. So maybe get to low 6s.
That is a big jump. Yeah. 2 points in a month. 2 percentage points.
Yeah.
I should say.
Yeah, and it's probably 1 point, 3 in all reality, but
right. It's just the first number. What's the first number?
Yeah.
But when it comes to interest rates, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, they're so high." Well, they're comparing it to an all-time, historic low,
right,
of the pandemic years. 6, 5.5, 6, 7, that's average. That it truly over the past, if you look over the past 20 years, that is an average interest rate. So, kind of trying to get that communication out there too, to especially, first time home buyers, who have started looking within the past 5 years. I don't predict we'll see, 2.5-3% anytime soon. So, as far as, the question we always get is, well, I'm not buying because I want to wait until interest rates come down. So let's do a little bit of math, shall we? I find this very interesting. So to make it very simple, if you were to get in and buy a house today for $500,000 at a 7% interest rate, I just rounded up, your PI, which is your principal and your interest, is going to be about $3,400 a month. In the next, if you wait 5 years to buy a house, you wait for interest rates to go down to 5%. On average, I took kind of a very conservative number. Say that house that was $500,000 today goes up in 4%, equity in 5 years. So now it's looking at about a $610,000 house. So you go to buy that house at $610,000 at a 5% interest rate, your monthly payment is going to be like $3,300 a month. So you're only saving $100 a month, but you're losing $110,000 worth of equity by waiting.
Gotcha.
So if you can't afford it and you can't get into a house, get into it now, because we are not going to see a drop in pricing in the next, foreseeable future. So kind of throwing numbers at you, but it kind of sets that stage, if you will, as to really waiting for interest rates to go down. It's not going to save you that much more money, but you're going to be losing equity substantially.
And not to mention, I mean, I know it has a little play in it, but it's an election year coming up, and we don't know what's going to happen with the rates on that. So,
well, that's why a lot of people were expecting them to go down a little bit more to the point we're at now. Because, I mean, we're almost to June. We're almost halfway through the year. It was more of an expectation that I think a lot of people also thought it was just going to plummet, which, like I said, that's realistically never going to happen again.
right.
But yeah, it is always a little volatile in an election year. You don't really know what's coming.
Right.
But like Michelle was saying, even if they do drop, it's not going to be what everybody is wanting it to be.
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to drop down to 2.53% again.
No.
So you got to kind of weigh your pros and cons of what waiting is going to do, because you're realistically going to be in a very similar situation in 5 years that you are right now.
For sure. And you said they predicted 6 times that it would drop this year.
That they would adjust.
They would adjust. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I make sure I say that correctly.
Could go up or down.
Okay,
Yeah.
it would adjust. Thank you for clarifying that.
It's like playing blackjack. You never know.
That's true.
example.
How many times has it adjusted so far this year?
I think we just had our third, right?
I was
Third?
gonna say that,
Okay.
yeah.
So it really is, they try and span it equally for the 12-month period.
Yeah.
They'd kind of probably do that on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make you wait it out.
Right. I was talking to one of my lenders this week, and he was excited about rates coming down, and everybody has they're the person that they listen to, right? All the podcasts, they're econ people, and it just, no one's ever spot on, truly, but we do our best, right, to try and predict as much as we can. And it's kind of delayed, I would say, once the feds do something, and then everything kind of starts to come into fruition from there. But at least talking to one of my very well trusted lenders, he's optimistic, as we all are.
And mortgage applications have gone up in the past few weeks too. So the buyers are still out there. They're coming out. They're doing it. They're seeing if they can get qualified and going out and purchasing the home. So again, we also say, if you're waiting for rates to drop, say they do drop from, what are we at, high 6s, say they drop to mid 5s. Now you, along with everybody else, is going to be jumping into this game. And we're going to see the same problems as before. You might have a lower rate, but are you going to be able to find the house now?
Right.
So waiting for anything, it's really just, can I qualify? Start the application, see where you sit at. If it's realistic, if you're able to do it, you might as well just start the process. There's no harm. You don't have to buy the house.
Yeah.
But not even knowing where you're sitting and just waiting, you're waiting along with everybody else.
I love how smart you both are. It's truly, I can tell that how well you know the market, how well you know Colorado and buyers and sellers. It's refreshing to be on the other side, to be like, what is really going on? And because I think we have as us commoners who aren't agents, it's daunting. You know, we all think that, yeah, it's going to get so much better when they lower. But like you said, if you're really saving $100 per month, and what you said is exactly spot on. If we all are waiting, we're going to have the same crisis that we've been in. And then you just have more competition. And so now you're in a totally different pickle. So
Yeah.
you guys are very wise. Thank you for educating our listeners and us here, because it definitely helps.
I love the saying that my dad told me. He said, date the rate, marry the house. Because you can, the rates will change and you can always refi. Find your home that you love. Don't settle for something less. Find the home that you love, get in, and then you can make adjustments from there.
So true. Are you guys finding any change as far as people trying to go through the mortgage process versus cash? Is that the same that you guys have seen that, or is there a difference in that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, not much has changed as far as that goes. I would say we're kind of getting a little bit of both. Loans aren't necessarily a bad thing. So if you're a seller and you get a loan and versus a cash, like, yeah, there are some contingencies in certain things, but you can kind of waive some things so that you can compete as a cash buyer and whatnot. There's also programs out there that you can kind of rent to buy, if you will. So a company, you get it pre-approved through them. They're called Home Partners. They're great. I kind of went through a whole training with them, but you get pre-approved through them. They go and buy the home for you cash, and then you essentially rent back to them, and you have the opportunity to buy, or you don't. You can walk away and just rent, and you're fine, or you can. They have a fixed rate. Each year that's going to go up. They'll say, if you buy it after 2 years, this is what the price will be, and that will never change. So there are some making you a cash buyer options out there if you want, but they're not as popular as they were back in the COVID days when everybody seemed to be a cash buyer. That's the only way you could get into a home. But there hasn't been a huge change, I don't think, as far as one over the other. If you come in with good terms and a good price, you nearly as comparable to a cash buyer.
If people decide to do the rent to buy option, is that negotiable with the seller and buyer, or are you still looking at the high sixes? Is that based off if you're actually buying today? Is there any difference with that?
Does it freeze that rate? That's what you're asking.
Yeah.
So they do have, it doesn't freeze the rate. So it'll be, whatever the rate is going to be when you decide to buy.
At that time.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's why it's like you can buy it within 5 years, I think is like the max. So you can decide based on rates when it might make the most sense for you to purchase.
Okay.
Or not. You can, no harm, no foul. You have no obligation by any means to buy the home. You could just end up renting anyway and then leave, and that's fine. You're not locked in because of these programs.
Okay, awesome. One other quick question before we take a break. I know we had talked about rate buy downs, and I will hopefully not butcher this question. Last time you all were here, it was about new builds, about the person building can also help you with the rate. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of new construction companies offer a lower rate because they can, if you get a mortgage through their sister companies, they can control things a little bit better. So you get your mortgage through their company, they can offer a lower rate. And then a lot of times too, as the builder, as an incentive to get buyers into their community, will help you buy down on closing costs as well. So up front, all of it is a lot lower than a resale property, and that's just because they're building, they have more control. So they can decide if you get a lower rate and help you with closing costs, or you can use more of your closing costs to buying down the rate even more. It's kind of a different little world over there because they have more control over what goes in and out.
Okay. I like that there's a silver lining for people to make it a little bit easier, especially if you are, your early 20s, you're in your first job, maybe your second job, you have a little kiddo, like there is hope on the horizon and there's help. Again, I think it's nice to be educated, and thank you both for communicating with both your buyers and sellers. Say, here's the process, here's all of the information, here are your different options, to make it really kind of streamlined and make it clear and easy, because it can be, it's a, like you said, it can be a very stressful time in a person's life. So to make it helpful makes everyone happier in the long run. So, do you have something you wanted to add?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay.
Want to take a break?
Sure. We'll take a quick break. I can speak. Quick break.
It is Colorado. What are you doing in here? It's
Oh my
raining.
goodness. Okay. Again, thank you all for listening. We are with Allie and Michelle, your REMAX professionals. We're going to take a quick break and be right back in about 45 seconds. I gotta love that laugh at the end. It's a great way to bring us in and end us. Thank you all again for listening to a special exclusive interview with K4CO Radio. We are joined now into the afternoon with Michelle and Allie, our REMAX professionals here in Colorado. Thank you both again for coming in. It is awesome. We get to have you in every month because it is, like you've said, changing every day, definitely every month. Rates, market, the whole shebang is changing all the time. We love you guys for many different reasons. I wanted you all to go into what makes you special, what makes your team unique, and what's on the horizon as far as your listings are concerned, because you have some on the horizon, it sounds like.
Yeah. So one thing that really puts Allie and I apart, we are a team, so you're getting 2 for 1. And we are natives, so we do know the areas very well. And we do have backgrounds in real estate that we grew up in as well. So both of our parents have been around the real estate world for 30 plus years. So that obviously having that expertise behind us has been very helpful. We also are on a bigger team as well. So there's the 2 of us, then we're also on a team of 7 of us. So we have my dad actually, who's kind of our team manager. My mom also is in the business as well. She's one of our showing agents, buyer's agents. So a little bit of a family thing going on.
When you click on their names, it'll bring you to their sites where your listings are located, correct? So, yeah.
Yep.
For sure. Again, they are, so Michelle Romano, and the email address for her is MROMANO@remax.net. So that's mromano@remax.net. And her cell is 303-328-7075. And Allie Peters, her email is apeters@remax.net. So that's apeters@remax.net. And her cell is 720-341-2959. And again, you can find them all over our site and website. So yeah, if you're looking for a house, if you want to buy or sell, now is the time. As these gals just mentioned, don't wait. It doesn't make any sense. You will increase competition if you wait, which I've never thought about that. Of course, if you wait till rates drop, you're going to be with a few thousand of your closest friends fighting over the house that you love. Yeah, if you're saving $100, like in the end of the end game,
Yeah.
really?
And losing equity. Yeah. You're
losing
losing
equity.
hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity too. So
Absolutely. Thank you, gals, for coming in, especially coming in every month with things changing. We so appreciate it. We love being partnered with you. Anything else that you all wanted to add before we sign off?
No, but thank you for having us.
Yeah,
It's
thank you so
always
much.
So fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, gals, again. And thank you for listening to K4CO Radio. We have a wonderful group of music coming up for you this afternoon and into this evening. And thanks again for tuning in to the exclusive interview with our REMAX professionals.